Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. You ready, Suzanne? Okay. We'll move on to agenda item number 13G, Commission Regulation 1408, Black Bear Season. Pete Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Bradley, Endow. We have a black bear population that appears to be thriving and is likely on the increase in distribution both numerically and geographically in western Nevada. And if a season is recommended for continuation after the three-year evaluation, we would recommend that the season be open September 15th through November 31st as per the subcommittee recommendation. That's different from our recommendation that went out in the open as part of our support material. So that's why it's different from the one on the screen. No other changes were recommended as far as distribution, hunt units, season hours, hunting hours. One addition that was also recommended was that one mandatory black bear indoctrination class be held, at least one, and the date recommended right now is for Reno is August 16th, 2014 from 1 to 4, and the location has not been determined as yet.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Bradley? And I'm probably going to turn it over to Dave. So during the conversation, Mr. Bradley spoke about the three-year review. Could you give us an update, even though we had a Black Bear committee update yesterday? Can you explain where we're at in the process, and since you're the chairman of the Black Bear Committee?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, kind of reiterate what we talked about yesterday. We did begin the process of conducting a three-year comprehensive review of the bear hunt, and we focused on commission regulations. That was one of the primary focuses, and again, we talked about the timing of the bear hunt relative to the review. And I guess the reason for talking about the commission regulations was to provide opportunity to take action at this meeting on season dates, season lengths, hunt hours, any of the special regulations that pertain to the indoctrination class came up, things of that nature. And maybe it wasn't the best strategy, but it's what was in mind in case the committee felt that there was a dire need to do something. So as part of that process, we did settle in on a discussion relative to the season dates. And I don't know that I can say it was a lengthy discussion, but ultimately we ended up with a split vote to recommend to the commission to modify the season so that instead of ending on December 31st, it would end December 1st. And some of the items that were discussed as supporting factors or factors that kind of contributed to the decision were concerns for the potential for bears to be trying to get into their hibernation and their pre-denning rituals, I guess was the term that was used. There were a fairly limited number of bears that have been taken over the last 3 years. In December, I think we've had a total of 3 bears in 3 years. Larry, is that what it was? And there was also a discussion on the, although it may not weigh completely into here, maybe the impact might have been, there was a discussion on a certain number of bears that had been chased, I guess, or had been treed. that were never taken, and it was felt, I think, that as these bears were getting late in the season, that it was important to give them the opportunity to go into their hibernation and stuff, and not chase them for that additional month. That the opportunity for the hunters, with only 3 bears taken, it wasn't a real significant impact on bear take necessarily, and it wasn't a real significant loss in opportunity, since there weren't a lot of bears taken anyway. Things that are missing, and we'll hear about it, is how much time was spent in the field. I guess there was somebody that was asking questions about that. Do we have any relevant specific information on how these activities have disturbed pre-denning rituals? There was nothing specific provided. These were things that were discussed just from the committee standpoint. There was a motion and action was taken. So I don't know if there were any specific questions from anybody on the.
Obviously, Endow made an initial determination that the original season of December 31st was justified. It's obviously in our materials, and so I guess what I'd like to understand is from a biological standpoint, from Endow, what were the reasons moving it from December 31st to December 1st?
We didn't actually initially recommend it, but the literature from Nevada does point out in our biological bulletin, that December 1st is when most females are going underground, if they haven't already.
Any other questions?
I'd like to follow that up. When we originally set the seasons for this hunt over 3 years ago, I don't recall that this being any kind of a concern, given the limited number of tags that are given out, and especially for this last month, given that there are a number of the tags that have been filled, and we're only talking about the remaining hunters, this being any kind of a substantial impact on this bear resource. And so, I guess I'm struggling with the impact that this hunting, what bears that aren't hibernating in December has on this resource, vis-a-vis the opportunity for the remaining hunters who haven't filled, still have the opportunity to hunt. And so I guess that's where I'm struggling with this recommendation.
For the record, Larry Gilbertson, Department of Wildlife. Well, you're precisely right. We didn't make a department recommendation to not include December. That was a committee recommendation. And so our recommendation was to continue with the hunt. And we handled any concerns we had by making the hunt as conservative as we did. As you know, the whole process of using a much smaller population estimate, a 2008 estimate to start with, and taking what that data provided and cutting the harvest limit in half, and then using the highest hunter success in the West, which was Utah's hunter success, to calculate the quotas. So everything we did for this hunt was ultra conservative from the start. So the point you make, besides that, us being conservative, and then the point by the end of December, there isn't that much pressure out there. It's not a real biological concern from our standpoint right now.
And I guess my last question is what kind of season structures do we have in other states that hunt bears in the West that are similar to our situation? I'd like to understand what's happening in Idaho and Wyoming and Utah. I mean, what periods of time? What are the season dates in those states?
Commissioner Drew?
Maybe while Larry's looking for some information, and I don't know if he'll have it on hand today, but I think it seems to me that the original season that was set mirrored California's dates if I remember right. And Larry, if I'm misspoken on that, you can correct me. But I think that was the original season that was set 3 years ago. And we had information at the committee in terms of every bear that's been harvested. We had the harvest date, the number of days scouted, the number of days hunted, not necessarily number of days hunted per unit, but overall number of days. We did not have that information per se for people who were unsuccessful in the hunt, so we never did really look at that, and that wouldn't have necessarily gleaned out how many days were hunted in each one of those months. So just to give you a sense of some of the information we had to look at the time.
Yeah, and I guess, that's the next thing I was gonna get to. It seems to me that, that making the point that only 3 bears were killed in December is not what's really relevant. What's relevant is how many remaining hunters have not filled their tags are actually hunting in December. And it doesn't seem that we know that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
That was my recollection for the data we looked at. In fact, I think I had asked Carl if it made sense to maybe look at, I think it was more relevant to units, but if we needed to look at updating the survey results from the sportsmen coming out of the field to try and get a sense of where they were distributed and when they were distributed. But at this time, I don't think that information is available.
Okay.
And one of the most contentious issues amongst some committee members at the meeting was this season date discussion. When the season was originally implemented, it was to mirror California season dates with a mid-August opening day. And in the 2012 February 2nd, 3rd commission meeting that we held over at the Las Vegas Convention Center, there was discussion, and that's when the season date moved to September 15th. Part of the discussion that occurred at the committee meeting was we moved season date and unit boundaries in the same season, and the discussion was, why did we move it to September 15th? My recollection was it was user group conflict. Some other people's recollection was it was because it was too hot to run hounds. And so we couldn't come to how that actually shook out at that meeting during our committee meeting. So Tuesday night I spent about an hour and 40 minutes, reviewed every single minute of that agenda item from that commission meeting. And as a result of that, when Larry was doing his presentation, Mr. Gilbertson, he spoke of user group conflict. Mr. Macbeth, you were chairman at the time. You spoke of user group conflict. Mr. Johnson made a public comment about user group conflict. Only one comment was made about heat and dogs, and that was by a non-hunter. So dogs and heat played no part of moving it to September 15th. It just was coincidental that we went to the September 15th for user group conflict to get out of the tourist season in the Lake Tahoe Basin and to avoid hikers. September 15th was a date that we knew all the kids had gone back to school and vacation time in the Tahoe-Reno area had really dropped off. So it was a comfortable date to avoid user group conflict. So that's how we got to that date. At that same meeting, we talked about the unit boundaries. And it was on the agenda to come up with the final unit boundaries. And the department had recommended inside the Lake Tahoe Basin. And we couldn't come to conclusions, so we held off on that part of the discussion until the next meeting. And it was at the following meeting, after we'd already set the dates to avoid user group conflict, that we determined the unit boundaries, and that change occurred at a following meeting. So even though they occurred in the same season, the use of dogs and hounds and everything was not part of the discussion. I just wanted to put that on the record because that was something that was really brought up a lot at the committee meeting. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify the December 1st date is per the committee,
Yes.
and the department's recommendation is the 31st of December?
Pete Bradley, and yes, sir.
Okay,
That's correct.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Drew?
This is something that I think I had asked Carl and maybe Larry, I had asked you this, I think when we first started into this, but, you know, we had the luxury of looking at some of the numbers and the distribution of the harvest and things of that nature. And my question to Carl was, do you see anything at this time, either in the harvest numbers or harvest distribution, that causes you consternation or concern for the overall long-term viability of the population or even some smaller portions of the population? And so, even though that's on the record at the committee meeting, I guess I would ask that again, just so it's part of this record, because that's something that's obviously pretty important to me when we are discussing these sorts of things. So,
For the record, Larry Gilbertson, Department of Wildlife. Yeah, our answer to that was that it was no, we didn't see anything in the harvest data or the total mortality data or all the bears handled data, including conflict bears and everything that we've looked at, that would indicate there's some sort of a sex and age ratio change in the population or something that would bring concern that there's a negative impact on the bear population that would require us to make any kind of changes at this point.
May I add something to that?
Yes.
Yeah, to confirm what Larry said, this is just a sliver, basically, of the population, and one of our long-term goals as a department is to, preserve, protect, manage, and restore all of our native populations. And for black bear, we're hoping at some point to, with the right kind of public support and user group support, to bring bears back to all of their native range, including 16, 17, Area 11, 7, 6, wherever they occurred in the past. And this is not in any way going to impact that goal.
Commissioner Macbeth?
Either Pete or Larry, is the department going to provide any additional information, any additional biological information with regard to the bears between now and May when we set seasons?
What I asked Carl to do was, we've been writing an annual black bear status report every year that goes in our big game herd condition and status report for all big game species. And normally, of course, we all do that in April, and that's for the May quota setting meeting. And I asked Carl to do that early this year to address this issue of a 3-year review. And I asked him to expand on the normal reporting in that status report, and to think about the questions that would be asked. Is what effect did the bear hunt have on the normal things that we are measuring out there, the normal things we're looking at in the bear population to decide its status from year to year. And so basically, he's done that. He could probably expound on a few things. I didn't want him to go overboard on some of it so that it looked like we were rubbing something in people's faces and making case after case that we're not seeing an impact. And he could probably look at a couple of more factors if people want more. But basically what we looked at is, did the hunting of bears cause a change in sex and age ratios that would indicate we're impacting the bear population or reducing the bear population? We looked at the total mortalities, and as we reported, They averaged 35 bears per year for the last 3 years during the hunt. The previous 5 years to the hunt, they also averaged 35 bears per year. So now we've had an average of 35 bear mortalities per year for the last 8 years. So obviously there was no change in that data. So we're not seeing that. The age class in the harvest was higher than the overall age classes that we've been measuring. And that's why, you know, we don't look at just the harvest data. Our management plan, this whole three-year review came about because in our management plan, we identified that we would look at harvest from a 3-year standpoint, obviously because an individual year's data is a really small size, and 3 years gives you a better picture. And other Western states manage, in fact, states throughout the North America, manage bears by looking at long-term averages, 3-year compared to 5-year compared to 10-year. We do that for all big game species. We don't make a drastic change in a season just because, you know, we have a few tags out there and a big storm hit and success went way down or way up. We don't make drastic changes the next year. We look at averages to see if there's a trend to indicate there's a population level problem of some sort. And so that's what we're doing with bears. And the legislature, when Carl made his presentation to the legislature and talked about our three-year review, that's exactly what they were, as far as I could tell, they were expecting, is that we would look at the bear hunt biologically with a 3-year review, and that's what we've produced in that report Carl put out. So I'm not sure what other data you might look at that would give you an indication or suggestion that something's going wrong with the bear population. It was mentioned in, I think, public comment yesterday that, you know, we look harder at our bear population than any other big game population we have out there. And per number of bears, we collect more data. We've been conducting research since the late 90s on bears. Bears are the only big game species that we go out and look at every mortality. We don't go out and look at all the road-killed deer and elk, but on bears, we go out and look at every mortality so that we can get sex and age data. And obviously we do that because with big game, we can go out with a helicopter and collect a survey sample size. You can't do that with bears. So we go the extra mile with bears. And so we have the database of bear mortalities. We have a database of research bears that we handle, and then conflict bears. And we look at all of that data together to assess the age structure and the sex structure of the population to make sure that there's plenty of old age class animals in the population, that we're seeing young in the population. We continue to document older age class bears that we hadn't contacted before. All of those things indicate a larger bear population and or immigration into the state. So that's the data we're looking at to make sure that our bear population is in healthy condition and able to sustain all the mortalities that we see out there.
Commissioner Lane?
I guess, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a couple of questions, because I guess that what I haven't seen yet, and you know, I have to say to you that you indicate that probably the bears are the most studied, but I don't think I've ever seen an article about an elk that's been, or a deer that's been killed by a car, or something's happened. And yet, if you look at some of the Northern Nevada papers, every bear mortality is discussed in great detail in the newspapers. I mean, you can kind of, down here in Southern Nevada, we can kind of track that. And one of the questions I have for you, though, is, and I haven't heard you really address this, is there was a bear cub that was just recently euthanized, I think, because it was poor weight. And what I haven't heard in this discussion is a discussion about the number of orphan bears. Are you seeing more orphans? Because sometimes my understanding is when the bears are chased, and I know at that point you don't know if it's a male or female, that they may leave their cubs behind. I haven't heard anything about the discussion about are you seeing more bear cubs that are in bad shape and have to be euthanized, as this bear cub was, yesterday or so? And are you seeing more unattended bear cubs? I'm just curious about that. Are you seeing different conditions, or it's the same condition? You talk about mortality, but I'd be curious in terms of adults versus the cub population. Excuse me.
As far as we know, Carl hasn't seen any uptick in abandoned young following the hunt. Was that your question, Commissioner?
Yes, yes, or even the condition. If you're noticing a different condition of bear cubs that don't look well, because you certainly have captured enough of them this year, you'd have a pretty good indication of the condition of the bear cubs.
Director Wasley.
Yeah, if I can just add, maybe to kind of get to your question or your observation that a lot of the bear mortalities in the north are reported. I think that there's two main causes, two main reasons why that's the case, and I think one of them is transparency, and that was the whole reason that I mentioned the euthanized cub yesterday was transparency, and we've been accused of killing bears, willfully killing bears, and hiding it and lying about it. And so I think it's good to be as open and transparent as possible. Ordinarily, I wouldn't find that relevant or of interest, but I think that it's important that we be transparent in order to try to establish some trust, and we show what we're doing. I think that's one reason. The other reason, I think, is that we want to demonstrate to people interested in bears that there are other sources of mortality, and that when we can demonstrate not only that there are other sources of mortality, but in some cases it's indicative of not only the distribution but the density of the population. When we see the number of animals that are getting hit on the road, it's not independent of the size of the population. And so it may not necessarily be good news, but I think it helps establish trust. It helps establish that things outside of hunters are responsible for mortality, and it helps demonstrate the distribution and density of that population.
Commissioner Lane.
But I think the fact that you're very concerned about providing this transparency speaks to the level of interest that the general public has in the bear population. Would you not agree? I mean, all you have to do is look at the discussions that go on between the PIO and the general public and some of the issues that go back and forth, that there's a high level, it seems to me to be a very high level of interest with the general public about the bear issues.
Yeah, that certainly may be the case, but I think that for me personally, my motivation is to establish some rapport and some trust. And there's been some pretty strong accusations, not only about the actions, but about not the specific direct actions and how we've handled animals, what we've done with them, but then subsequently what we've done with that information. So my primary motivation, if not my sole motivation, is for transparency, not necessarily and I think it also speaks to perhaps an arbitrary placement of higher value on one form of wildlife than others. And you talk about not seeing those articles about elk and deer. Does that mean that there's a segment of society that places a higher value on the life of a bear than the life of an elk or a deer, if that interest only is with respect to those bears? Possibly, but it's certainly a criticism that we've had, and I think that my primary, if not sole motivation, is to try to be as transparent as possible, to try to build some rapport and trust with those who have been critical of the agency and our actions.
Commissioner Drew.
This won't directly address Commissioner Lane's question, but there was a little bit of discussion kind of around the denning issue and one other piece, and I'll see if I can think of it while I do this. But I did ask Carl about the collared bears. We have satellite collared bears now in the pine nuts and I believe the pine groves, and I asked if he had seen anything in the collaring data that suggested den abandonment. and he had not at that point. I think we touched a little bit on body condition in regards to the animals that they had handled, and it seemed like maybe there was a little bit of a decrease, although we didn't really talk about that. And I think that was a lot of drought-related factors, or we had surmised that that may be an issue, but I don't think we got into that very much at all. I know that data was collected. I can't necessarily recall it all. And then we also talked a little bit about the condition of the female bears that had been harvested, and everyone had been a dry bear. So we did have that information at least in front of us.
Dave may correct me if I'm wrong, but the body condition, I asked specifically the question because I was worried about a couple years ago we had a very robust pine nut crop in the pine nut in the Sweetwater range, and the bears were just loaded with pine nuts, and it was noted they were loaded with pine nuts and faces full of pitch and everything. And so I had a concern that maybe that robust pine nut harvest might have brought some of the Sierra bears over, and we had an increase in bears in that other adjacent unit because of the feed. And I was worried that in an off pine nut year like we have this year, that those bears would disperse and head back towards the Sierras, or it would have an adverse impact on their body condition. And from all indication I got from Carl during the meeting, and like I said, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the bears just traded forage base, and the bear condition wasn't off, the numbers weren't off. They just changed what they eat, and everything seemed to stay the same. So is that your recollection of the conversation, Commissioner McNinch?
Well, I can't remember the exact, I don't recall any comments from the department for sure indicating that there were body condition issues with the adults. But we did have that pre-denning discussion, and I was saving my comments for a little bit later, but I'll share some of my personal thoughts because I think that's on the table here. And having come to this meeting and now and talked about shed antlers and we've talked about movement of deer during the winter time, things of that nature, and the expenditures of energy that they've got going into the winter. And I can't help, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't help but compare those dynamics for deer to the same concept for bear. I mean, here we've got an animal that's preparing to go into winter, and urban interface issues aside, I think it's safe to say that the wildland bear, any typical wildland bear, is expected to go into hibernation at some point. And in order to do that, they have to build up these huge fat reserves, or these huge, they have to eat this huge amount of food. And during that time, we're putting pressure on them. Now, at some level, and I've said this before, and I've always supported the management of wildlife through hunting. So I have a line in there where there's acceptability to that. But at some point, where do you back off and allow these animals to go through their pre-denning rituals so that they can do what they need to do to perpetuate and propagate? That's the term. And we hear about unhealthy sage grouse laying eggs that aren't viable. We hear about deer sacrificing pregnancies or aborting pregnancies because of body condition. And I don't know how much data we have to support that doesn't happen in bears. So I default away from the opportunity to provide to hunters. All things being equal, if I'm assuming that hunter pressure or hunter effort is consistent from 1 month to the next, which I would suggest isn't the case, but just for purposes of discussion, then there's something going on in December where people aren't finding bears. And that indicates to me that they're going into hibernation. But if you have the bell curve, like you might expect, where you have this big push in the middle of the season, then we're losing people that are interested in going out and getting in the field and hunting bears later in the season. So these are all things that are weighing into my mind. And I haven't defaulted to I'm giving the bear the benefit of the doubt on this one, whether there's something that specifically says don't do it or it's okay to do it. I think it's not worth, in my mind, I don't feel obligated to provide hunter opportunity in December when I've got these other things that are working in my mind. You know, and I could ask the question of the department, does shortening the season have any measurable impact on NDOW's management goals for bears?
For the record, Larry Gilbertson, Department of Wildlife. I've discussed it with Carl, and he actually doesn't have any concerns with the month of December not being available to hunters. He's pretty sure that people will just move their activities, take advantage of November and go more. When you have a longer season, of course, they can do other things and hunt other things in November and just put it off. And then because the bear season's still open in December, then they go ahead and participate. But again, the actual harvest was relatively small. I've heard input at least one county advisory board meeting where, you know, the hunters are pointing out that there would be a loss of opportunity for them, and they would like to maintain that opportunity. But from Carl's standpoint, he didn't have any issues with it. And one of the main reasons we did open it was exactly what Commissioner Drew mentioned. For the initial start of the hunt, we tried to make it match California's because of the boundary up there, as everyone knows. And if hunters wanted to, they could buy a California bear tag, and if they were pursuing a black bear in Nevada and it crossed the line, they could still be legal to pursue it and finish the hunt. But otherwise, yeah, we don't have any issue with it.
Any other commission comment? Commissioner Macbeth.
Dave, I do understand, you know, what you're saying, but I think there's a very big difference between the type of stress that the number of people out on winter range that we were dealing with the shed antlers and the very limited number of people that are out hunting these bears. I think it's a very, very I don't think the impacts are anywhere near the type of impacts that I think that we're seeing from the shed hunters.
Commissioner McNinch.
And I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, you know, we do have there is indication and there is information indicating that there were a large number of bears that were pursued but not taken, and so you know, at some point in there, I guess the argument could be made, why even worry about shutting the season down in December 31st? You know, I mean, why is December 31st outside of coordination with California, which I think is an important concept? Why is that relevant? And the answer is because most of them are going to bed, you know, and but why not provide that opportunity into January and February in case there are some? And we've had reports as recently, never mind the one yesterday, we've had a couple in Verdi, and we've had one in I think in Incline Village there was a reported one, and we've had one up in my neck of the woods still that apparently has been seen, and we're in February today. So you know, where do we fall out on that scale? Where do we stop? And you know, in some of our other hunts, we're not meeting our quota goals. So why worry about stopping when we haven't shot enough cow elk or enough, you know, why not carry it on further into the year? So, you know, those are things that run through my head, and that's because there's other issues at play, and that's where I'm at.
I have a biological question that maybe you guys can answer. You might have to wait for Carl, but compared to other states that have similar bears in Canada, the length of our denning season, I heard a bear can den 90 to 100 days, but the length of our denning season is 45, 50 days. They're in and out. And so if they carry the same fat reserves as a bear that can do a 100-day denning season, you know, with our not as long winters as every place else that bears occur, what impact do we have to a denning bear if the time they're in the den is much shorter than other places that similar bears occur.
Well, a couple of the things, this is Pete Bradley, and a couple of the things that may go into that consideration are that, number one, I believe Carl's dates for delayed implantation, where the animals actually affix their embryos to the uterus, is somewhere around December 1st, November 15th. And the date that Carl also has for the birthday that he uses as an average is today, is February 1st. And there's that period where at least denning females spend a considerable amount of time after that in the den raising those young. I'm not sure how your question, if you were looking at the males, how that would affect that segment of the population, but for females, it's still a considerable amount of time underground or in a tree.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Macbeth?
Having been involved in this bear hunt since its inception, I can tell you that that when it comes to seasons, we have the first decision that we made was to eliminate a spring bear hunt. Even though it was proposed, we eliminated that hunt entirely. Then, because of user conflicts, and that was the reason, user conflicts, we wanted to get beyond the Memorial Day weekend, the Labor Day weekend, and get away from the tourist season. We got testimony of what the tourist season was. We moved the season to September 15th. And nowhere in those discussions was there anything about the month of December. I just, at this point, with the lack of, information that really tells me that we have a problem here, I'm struggling as a sportsman to support shortening the season any further. That's simply where I'm at.
Commissioner McNinch?
Yeah, and I can understand that. I do. I accept that and I understand that. And to be real honest with you, I think, we're learning. We're learning as we go along here. None of us are bear biologists. That's a fact. And I think hindsight, for me, I wish I'd have known a little bit more about pre-denning. I wasn't part of that original process. So, what I've gathered has been over the last last couple years. And I haven't, for me, I'm not any kind of biologist by trade. I've had some schooling, but by trade, so I don't think to ask questions about these things either. So to me, there's probably a whole pile of things out there we're going to come across that I wish I'm asking questions about today, and I don't know what those are exactly. But so I have to deal with what I've got and the information that I've got. And I guess the bigger concern for me is this: as we move forward through this comprehensive review, refer to it as comprehensive review. This was a proposal that was brought, a recommendation that was brought forward by the committee. And if there's no change in the season date, I hope we don't lose sight of the broader aspect that maybe in the context of today's discussion, maybe we're not able to work through this issue the way we'd like to. But maybe I'd ask that everybody keep an open mind that it still could be an issue. We just haven't figured. Maybe it's not being articulated properly, and keep that open mind. Because I do think it's unresolved for me. It's unresolved, and to me it makes sense that there's impacts on an individual animal when they're being hunted at certain times of the year. Now there's an acceptability to that. There's an area where that's acceptable, but I don't know where that jumping off point is. For me on this one, based on the information that I had and that we got during the committee meeting and that we asked for, because we're still learning how to ask the right questions. that's where my default is. And so, you know, regardless of what happens today, I hope that we keep an open mind about where, you know, that it might be worthwhile to review this as part of the broader comprehensive review and package that's brought forward in the future, so.
Commissioner Macbeth.
Yes, and I'm always willing to listen, and of course, I'm going to be off the commission in June, and so when it comes around, you know, I won't have, you won't have me to be asking the questions. But what is a profound fact to me? And I'm not a biologist, and I've heard a lot of things, and yeah, I'm always willing to learn more and to listen and to learn more about bears and the denning issues and everything. But what is profound to me is that the state of California Department of Fish and Game and the Nevada Department of Wildlife have made a determination that we can hunt bears in December. And if there was a real substantial biological concern, why wouldn't those departments have made that determination before we even got here? Why would we be even talking about it if it was truly an issue? And so you know, not a biologist, I haven't heard all the evidence, but I can find some comfort that the agencies who are responsible for our natural wildlife resources have made a determination that these bears can be hunted in December.
Any other commission questions, comments? Seeing none, let's go to general public. I'm sure we've got quite a few cards. I think our best bet would be to go through the cards.
All right, first one is Gil Yannick. He's now the last one. John Reed.
John Reed, Washoe Cab, but representing myself. Although at my cab position I do represent, I'm the first and only representative of the general public. These legions of general public, they don't exist. You got the same 10 or 12, I was at the meeting the other day, you got the same 10 or 12 people, most of whom are in Clive Village, that just keep coming down, coming down, coming down. You know them by name, and you call them by their first name. So we know what's going on. This looks to me like another appeasement. And under the 3-year review, I'm wondering whether or not you considered, when you banned the hunt from the Tahoe Basin, was that helpful to achieve your goal? Because from, I think, all the cab's positions, we thought that was simply, okay, let's give them that and they'll leave us alone. Well, they ain't leaving you alone, and they're not going to leave you alone if you do this. By that I mean take away the 30 days in December that you're talking about. Those people are pretty emboldened, and it continues that way. Now, at that committee meeting, I did some real science called mathematics in my head, and I've had subsequently the chance to do it the other way. If I recall correctly, Carl said there were 400 to 600 bears, but I remember distinctly that he said there were 55 opportunities where bears were passed on. If that's the number he used, that's the best that we've got from the surveys. If you add that 55 to the 14 that were killed, that's 69 bears, 69 bear chases or encounters. We'll just say all the spot and stocks were just chases. That's 5 bears a week over an area that's probably bigger than an eastern state. So if you only took the lower number of the 400 bears using this math, you're looking at a 0.25% chance of a bear getting chased on any given day in an area of the state of size of Rhode Island. So that's the pressure that we're kowtowing to. That's the math, that's the science so far from what has been given to us by the bear biologist. So I don't see this as a real big deal personally. It's interesting that I had a constituent 3 years ago when we were talking about this, and he said it's all about the bears. At that committee meeting, he said it's all about the hounds. This isn't about bear hunting, it's about hunting or getting rid of it. So my recommendation would be if you move that 30 days to, or if you get rid of that 30 days, you're still gonna have about the same number of people that didn't, for whatever reason, kill a bear in those tags, I would suggest that we should maybe open up the month of May for a spring bear hunt. A lot of states do a spring bear hunt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Reese?
Mike Reese, representing Southern Nevada Coalition for Wildlife. For the record, 2012, when we had the discussion about the user groups and stuff, I want to remind everybody that it was unanimous. Every single cab in the state voted not to change the boundaries. This board changed the boundaries. No cab did. The other bullet point I want to bring up is there is no flags that currently have been raised by Carl Lackey or the NDOW on anything that says what we shouldn't do or what we should do. It's been status quo. Commissioner Macbeth has already talked about, I'm in my 50s, and as long as I can remember, I'm from California. California's always had a bear hunt, and they've had it through December. None of these issues have ever come up. For lack of a better term, I'm going to call this an apprenticeship board. I fall in that because we've only had 3 years to discuss this. We're still serving our apprenticeship, if you will. Our biologists have been on staff for 10 plus years. I see it unfitting for this board to override our biologists without having the years of experience behind us. Now, to my knowledge, I could be wrong and I stand to be corrected. I don't think anybody on the board, myself included, has ever hunted a bear. So none of us are really talking from experience. I stand corrected then. Okay.
Not in this state.
Or in any state. Awesome. Okay. Commissioner McNitch, you've talked about earlier is learning as we're going along. You know what? Us as the cabs are learning as we're going along. We're taking this input in and stuff. But if we apply the same discussion to sheep, to deer, that we hunt post-rut, what's wrong with having that spring bear hunt? I know you're going to come up and say, yeah, but you got a sow that might have cubs and stuff. Yes, but if what we're going to do, using Jack Rob's analogy earlier 15 years ago when they did such a good job with the sheep, what's going to happen with our bear? Are they going to get up there and we say, man, why didn't we do something earlier? We're in an early stage. I think we should look at a spring bear hunt. As I'm standing up here, this speaker, I noticed somebody is baited up here to get some speakers to come up and speak. We've got some candy and stuff up there, so I think I'm going to exit my time and take a sucker and go sit down in the audience. Thank you.
Paul Dixon?
For the record, Paul Dixon, Chairman, Clark County. We had a pretty good discussion at our cab on this topic, and there were questions asked about what went on at the committee meeting, and that's why I'd asked for potential maybe to get the chairman of every committee to send an email out with the actions afterwards. If it takes them 15 minutes, and staff can always follow that up with official record for things, but an unofficial, here are some minutes things. I think from the cab's perspective, we know that the biologists and what was sent as backup material that sat out of the system that went for the bear committee meeting did not suggest to us that there was anything in the bear population that was changing things. I know that Jana Wright and others in the audience at my meeting asked questions about why we weren't specifically discussing that. And to be honest with you, we didn't have that discussion, but we did, as a board, decide that we saw no imperative need to change the season dates from what they were, based on the fact, and we didn't feel that hunter success or number of hunters left in the field during the last month was a reason to change the season dates that we had heard that the bear committee recommended. Thank you.
Rex Flowers?
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. We voted to support recommendations from the department December 31st. There's no reason to change to an earlier date. We did hear about the only 3 bears being harvested in the month of December. The hunt has never been about harvest. It's been about opportunity, like it is with every other game species that we hunt. you talk, we hear from others about, well, you don't have your reports yet, you don't have this, you don't have that. You don't have a report saying that it's detrimental to hunt bears in December. So I can't understand why you would want to do that. We talk about the number of animals that have been treated and released. That's over a 3.5-month period of time. So, you know, how many of those are done in December? I mean, we have no studies on how many hunters are in the field in December. It's very incomplete. And I think we should wait until we get our reports before we make any decisions to take away opportunity. Thank you.
Joe Krim.
Joe Krim, Persian Cab. At our meeting, we voted to go with the department recommendations, and the recommendations that we went by were the ones that we had in our packets that were sent out to us. So we would like to see this date stay from September the 15th to December 31st.
Stephanie Myers.
Stephanie Myers, Mount Charleston. Data and science are two different things. They obviously affect each other, but they are very different, data and science. It's not science to say that we got bears, so let's kill them. There's no reason to allow this shooting and killing of what the public certainly considers just purely a trophy hunt. Before a season is defined, before any of this, there should be a moratorium on the bear hunt completely. And we really need to have a fully scientific review, which will include the biological, social, fair chase, and ethical implications of whether black bears should be killed at all. And hunter opportunity and convenience should not be a factor in this review. By the way, at the Clark County CAB meeting, somebody, I hope facetiously, said that we ought to introduce bear to the Spring Mountains down here, and I hope that you will find that as laughable as I do. Thank you very much.
Fred Volz.
For the record, Fred Volz speaking for the Nevada Political Action for Animals organization. Premeditated human killing is a major transgression against society. Why then is there a cavalier attitude toward killing wild bears who have not killed other bears or people? Do we reflexively kill humans who unlawfully break and enter buildings or cars to take food? Those same humans supposedly have language and reasoning skills incomprehensible to bears. Yet we do not kill the humans for such actions, but we do kill the bears. Gratuitous killing is not conservation, but permanent destruction. And no amount of subjective rationalizations can justify the killing. Yet this commission and its committees continuously promote wildlife killing, as witnessed this morning, not for the best interests of these wildlife species, but to maximize wildlife killing opportunities for a small handful of humans who visibly have an irrational bloodlust. Because they can dominate animals unequipped with GPS, night goggles, trail cameras, or sophisticated weapons, it is hardly an equitable matchup. We only have scattered data points, seat-of-the-pants thinking, and conclusory justifications for another year of bear killing, but no hard scientific evidence filtered through the prism of the formal scientific method, which was outlined for you yesterday in detail. Less than 1 year ago, we were told this state had between 400 and 700 bears, not 400 and 600, as was previously stated by Mr. Lackey. Now, miraculously, that number has been changed to, quote, around 600 after public criticism. This less than statistically accurate number has been used to make the questionable claim that our state has bear overpopulation, and the only solution is to kill the non-existent surplus. Do we kill surplus human beings? NRS 501.105 clearly states as its first requirement that this commission and NDOW are responsible for protecting, not summarily killing, wildlife species. With the ongoing drought, bears and every other wildlife species are under particular stress to survive. These challenged bears do not need the additional stress or peril posed by gun-toting killers with packs of uncontrollable dogs delivering terror. There is no plausible explanation or justification for a 2014 bear hunt. The empty claim that more bears are killed by cars than hunters does not justify more killing. The two events are totally disconnected from each other. If the Commission and NDOW were acting proactively and constructively, steps would be taken to encourage greater driver vigilance and better enforcement of speeding laws. Where are those actions to protect bears rather than slaughter them? Remember, commissioners and NDOW, you exist in your public positions to represent all residents of the state, not the small handful of wildlife killers you license and who pay only a small fraction of your operating expenses. You are not chartered with running a private hunting club. Public opinion has been strongly and consistently opposed to these bear hunts, which did not occur for 80 consecutive years. Where is the representation of that overwhelming opposition in your policies and actions? Stop the serial bear slaughter and cancel the 2014 bear season, which NRS 501.181 does allow. More gratuitous bear killing will only bring this commission and NDOW more bad public relations beyond what you have already created. Because humans can do something destructive isn't a sound argument for consciously engaging in destructive activities. If you are one of the death-targeted animals dismissively referred to as resources, it has an impact. Thank you.
Larry Johnson.
Well, that fires me up. For the record, Larry Johnson, representing Nevada Bighorns Unlimited and Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. And as a native of the Concow tribe in Feather River, where bear hunting was not only part of our livelihood, our religion, our heritage, our rites of passage into manhood, kind of on and on. A lot of these comments, quite frankly, are incredibly offensive. But putting that aside, modern world bear management, hunting opportunity. After the Bear Committee meeting, I personally quizzed Carl Lackey on whether hunting in the month of December had any adverse impact on the bear populations. His answer was no. So I don't think this commission needs to invent reasons to reduce hunter opportunity. When I think probably the best bear biologist in the West and the most scientific data per bear in the West, probably in the nation, recommends a season September 15th through the December 31st. My young friend that I lion hunt with, Ken Joy, NBU director, treed 6 bears in the month of December this year. Okay. While lion hunting with him almost every weekend, we encountered numerous bear tracks in the Carson Range. Those bears were out and about and doing quite well. This big fat tub of a guy was part of the bear snaring and GPS collaring work we did in June. And I had the fortunate opportunity to work with NDOW crews in that research project. This guy, before he started putting on his fat for the summer and winter, estimated live weight of somewhere between 350 and 400 pounds. And he's not an old age bear. They were in actually great shape. We have given the Tahoe Basin, we have given Whites Creek, Thomas Creek, we have given the shortening of seasons. We have made attempts at appeasement unsuccessfully, and as I testified in Senate Natural Resources, guys, you're just kicking this can down the road with SB 82. These sides are so polarized, we're never going to reach consensus on these items. These people want us to go away. We want to continue our hunting traditions. We want to do that also for the betterment of the species always. You have witnessed over the years, sportsmen are the first to say, let's close this season, as you've seen in several of the bighorn sheep areas. Let's close these areas to sage-grouse hunting because populations are in decline. We're the first to appear before you and say, let's be conservative. Let's do what is necessary to preserve our wildlife. In this particular case, we have an increasing bear population. We have not reached our hunting quotas that are safe estimates of animals to be removed from the population on an annual basis. There is no reason to shorten this season at all. Okay. Thank you.
Kathy Smith?
Kathy Smith, Reno, Nevada. I understand we have to discuss the season setting despite the 3-year review of the bear hunt is still underway. I anxiously await the broader picture of the 3-year review, including the psychosocial aspects. I hope it is well understood that the recommendations may change once again once the review is complete, and appreciate the committee recommendation of the season change. Our bears are stressed due to arid conditions, and especially over the past few years of drought. We allow hounds to further stress the bear by robbing them of the needed calories during the sensitive period. It has been confirmed that hounds also put stress on non-target animals, including deer in some studies. Now we have recommended night hunting. I'm glad it hasn't been brought up this time to accommodate the lion hunters who break the law. Chris Healy was quoted earlier this year in the paper as saying, "The drought has diminished the bear's natural food supply of nuts and berries. The bears are staying awake because they haven't eaten enough to sustain their hibernation." There is data on brown and polar bears demonstrating increased cub mortality, decreased reproduction, and decreased fitness with the physiological stress that occurs with hunting during hyperphagia. And I was happy to hear that the department and Commissioner McNitch were concerned about stressing other big game animals when, and I quote, "their energy reserves are low." And although there might not be the same number of hunters, definitely an individual bear has to have decreased fitness when chased by a pack of dogs. How and why are the bears different? Why are they not given the same consideration? And where is the data to support that they're not injured beyond the small hounding studies that are out there involving less than 20 bears total? Why are the ungulates favored so strongly over the predators, including our bears? Unfortunately, the limited data we get from our bear hunt does not meet statistical significance. So denning behavior, den disturbance, etc. is almost meaningless as scientific information. There are many studies confirming occurrences of den abandonment when dogs and or people come within 1 kilometer of their dens, and this is a proven fact. As far as seeing more bears being hit by cars, I would like for the department to comment on how bear home ranges change in times of drought by searching for food. You actually see more bears in times of drought, and it gives a perception that there are more bears present. I found it interesting that one of the themes of the recent Wildlife Society meeting was citizen science. They discussed the need to broaden the base of wildlife management to increase interest out of necessity. There is human dimension research from other states that confirm bear hunting in general is thought of differently than ungulate hunting. Previous studies have demonstrated around an 80% approval of ungulate hunting. However, a 2002 study in Utah that was published in the Wildlife Society Bulletin revealed that there is little public support for bear hunting. Only slightly more than half the hunters approved of black bear hunting, 23% of fishermen, and 22%.
Go ahead and finish it.
Okay, I just have a little bit. 22% of non-consumptive users 44% of hunters approved the use of hounds to hunt black bears, 16% of fishermen, and 9% of non-consumptive users. Colorado had recently passed a regulation against disturbing bears in their dens, and this regulation was passed to maintain and increase public support for wildlife and wildlife management by emphasizing safety and fair chase. I really hope that this commission takes public support into account when they make future decisions with respect to the bear hunt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jana Wright.
Mr. Chair, Commission, for the record, Jana Wright. At the Clark County CAB meeting, I had basically testified that I appreciate the report that the department made, but the one issue they didn't address was even if you can, should you be hunting the bears? As the previous people have said in support of not having a bear hunt, well, it's just too much sometimes to articulate. What I'm asking for is and I suggested at the CAB meeting, is a 3-year moratorium on the hunt, continue to allow the Bear Committee to ask the questions, and even the questions they haven't thought of yet, and have the comprehensive report, and then come back to the commission. By then you'll have 6 years of data on bears to add to what you have already, and then make an informed decision on whether you should have a hunt. Thank you.
Mitch Bizzetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mitch Bizzetti. I'm going to represent the Elko County CAB on this one. We voted to support the department recommendations of the September 15th through December 31st. We thought that would be what it has been, and we didn't see any problems. And our biologist there said they hadn't heard anything bad about the hunt, so that's kind of what we recommended.
Walt Gardner.
Walt Gardner for the record. From what I've heard, we have a growing bear population. At the worst, we've got a stable bear population during current hunting conditions. We've been taking bears, and if we're maintaining population or growing population, I see no reason not to continue the hunt the way we have it through December 31st. If I was to change it, I'd be more in favor of a spring bear hunt, possibly a pursuit season in the spring. But the fall season I'd leave as is. Thank you.
Henry Krenka. As he comes up, then I have Don Moldy, Gil Yannick, and then I'm out of cards. So if I haven't read your name, please fill out a card for me.
For the record, Henry Krenka, Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association. We recommend that you leave the bear seasons the way they are. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Don Mulderino. To use Commissioner Beth's terminology, I struggle frequently around here to understand why it is so hard for an animal to get a break. I've seen this over and over and over again over the years. And I also struggle to understand how it is that hunter opportunity trumps everything else. Sometimes I think this department should be called the Nevada Department of Human Opportunity to Kill Wildlife, since that seems to be the golden standard, the predominant feature that's considered. But that aside, to me, this issue is moot. I don't know, in a way, why we're discussing it today, this season length thing, although my understanding, actually I do, my understanding is that this is simply boilerplate. that you have to have something in place for the next season should it occur because of the inflexibility of the structure that you and others before you have built into this system. So we're going through the drill today just because it has to be done. But we all know that the 3-year review of this bear hunt has not been completed. And unless everybody's predetermined the outcome, which I don't really believe is the case, who knows what the end result will be. So from my point of view, I don't have much heartburn about what the committee recommended. I thought it was a nice gesture, but I don't think it has much to do with the final outcome of things. So I don't really care much what you do. Thanks.
Gil?
Gil Yannick, Carson Advisory Board. The advisory board would like to see the commission follow the recommendations of the department and go through the end of the year, December 31st. Thank you.
Anyone else who I didn't read?
Okay, with no further public comment, we'll bring it back to the commission. And I'm going to start off. Director Wasley, we hear of a full science 3-year review. Carl's completed his data. Do you know of any other science we could complete? I mean, it's under your current department standards that you use for science on all your other hunts. Is your science on all the other hunts equal to what we're basing our decisions on this hunt?
Tony Wasley, for the record. I think our game division chief, Larry Gilbertson, addressed that pretty well, saying that the amount of information, the amount of data, the level of scrutiny that we exercise with respect to bears exceeds our standards and levels on all others. And I think that's due to the level of scrutiny that the department has received. And there's been conservatism on top of conservatism due to that level of scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. And to follow up on conservative on top of conservatives, and it's been widely known that the Bear Committee made a recommendation for a December 1st closing date of the bear hunt. A lot of the reason the committee did that was it was a split vote, and I pushed that issue and came up with December 1st. I also helped push issues of Tahoe Basin and user group conflict September 15th, and I believe in both the basin and the September 15th user group conflict dates. With the discussion we had here today, and some of the points being made that California's done this for years, and December 31st has worked, and everything that's gone into this, and the department sees no biological reason. I have good reason for the basin. I have a good reason for September 15th. I'm struggling to come up with a good reason for December 1st. And with that being said, I know what the committee did, and I'm part of that committee, and I know how I voted during the committee, but as part of the discussion today, I think I could support the December 31st close of the bear hunt without supporting documentation why December 1st is better than December 31st. I have good reasons for the other changes we've made. I just don't have a good reason for this one. So with that being said, I defer to biology and science. Anybody else have a? Commissioner Drew.
I guess my reason for being the dissenting vote in the committee when the recommendation was made is that I, in the committee meeting, didn't have any epiphany moments that really propelled me to change to December 31st. And at that point, I guess my default was to keep it consistent for now, understanding that we're in the process of our 3-year comprehensive review. So that's where I was then. I think I'm pretty much in the same place now.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you. And I'm in the, I have the same thought process that Commissioner Drew does, except, I won't support the recommendations as provided. And for a lot of reasons, I'm not going to get into them. I want to speak on a broader scale real quick. The comments that I'm making are only made in the hopes that people are maintaining that they're only going to be heard by the people with an open mind. So I'm only speaking to the people that might have an open mind here. The rest of you, whoever that might be, maybe it's just it is what it is, and I have to accept that a little bit better. But we had a bill that went through the legislature, SB 82. And I guess regardless of which side of the bill you were on, have you stopped long enough to ask yourself, why did that bill go through the way that it did? There's a number of people in here, from one standpoint, you'd have to look at it, why couldn't I kill the bill? And from the other side, you have to ask, why couldn't I shove it through in its original form? Okay? Sit down and honestly ask yourself, why did I not get that pushed through? And don't blame it on, don't try to incorporate the weaknesses of the other viewpoints. Why weren't you able to get what you wanted out of it? I don't think anybody got what they wanted. Now, maybe ultimately it was a compromise, but I think it was pretty much split in here. I don't think anybody, otherwise that bill would have been presented the way it is right now, okay? So nobody was able to kill the bill, and nobody was able to push it through in its original form. And stop long enough to honestly ask yourself why, okay? Seriously. I think it's lacking in here. I really do. Ask yourself why. I think the personal prejudices are really starting to filter in. I've heard the term appeasement. Come on, really. I mean, seriously. Don't let it blind you from honestly considering the things that are being brought in front of you, that are being brought. And I'm not trying to lecture the commission here. I'm kind of lecturing the audience, maybe. I don't know. But don't let it cloud your ability to open your mind and say to yourself, hey, maybe they've got a point. Maybe something really is up here. Maybe they are actually right. I don't have to admit it, but maybe they're actually right. Either side, it doesn't matter which side of the thing you're on, okay? It doesn't matter which side of the issue you're on. Maybe somebody's right that maybe you don't respect them, but maybe they got a point. And, I'd hate to miss something that truly is important just because we're locked up on one side or the other of the issue. We don't have to go through this review. The legislature urged us to do this review. We don't have to go through it. If it's not important, let's not worry about it and let it fall out. Remember, ask yourself about SB 82. Are you really sure that you got it figured out, that you really got it under control? Because nobody got what they wanted the last time when you had total control then. Okay. As far as the comparisons, I've heard there was a handful of comparisons to California. It'll be interesting discussion when we start talking about hounding. We're going to talk about hounding here soon. It'll be interesting to incorporate what's happening in California into that discussion. I mean, spring bear hunts. We can have a discussion on that. I think I'm totally open to it. I think it'll be interesting. But the main point I wanted to make was really ask yourself, why wasn't I able to inflict my will on the legislature when this bill went through last time? And I think what it's telling us is get together, figure some stuff out, find some common ground, be civil, because if it gets down there, I don't think they're going to be happy with any of us. I think that they'll take some action, and I don't know if anybody's. I wouldn't bet money on anybody's cards right now. So that's where I'm at it. I'm not going to support a motion to keep the recommendations where there are, but I do agree with Commissioner Drew that as we move forward, that if there's something, I'm totally willing to come off of my position and be supportive of it if there's good reason to do it. And right now, I'm just not quite there. So,
Mr. Chairman, I want to
Commissioner
have
Young.
a couple comments. Thank you for the opportunity. I certainly have listened to this thing for the last year and a half. We spent a lot of time on this bear issue, we spent a lot of time on hunting. And when we're talking about broader things, Dave, you make a good point. You know, I was appointed this by Governor Sandoval. I was born in northern Nevada, Harrington, Nevada. My roots are there, but I've lived down here most of my life. And we spend a lot of time and effort on hunting. And most of the people here are hunters, and I'm a hunter. We spend very little time on fishing, bringing back a sport that I believe in so deeply in southern Nevada. It's completely gone and wiped out. It's pathetic. We can't even open our damn hatchery down here. We put no effort into it. All this time and effort, all the big money guys, all NBU and all that. Hey, and I respect and appreciate all that. But also there's other things that we could spend a lot of our time on. I'll tell you, bear hunting is a lot like capital punishment. There is no right answer. Everybody's got a personal value and judgment, and I've listened to that for 30-something years in law enforcement. We're all right, and I respect and appreciate all these folks' opinion, the fact that their heart's in it, in the right place, just like these guys, and you know, where I stand. And there's no right answer. This is a thing that's an individual thing that we'll never come to an agreement on as human beings. It's raging, you know, there's wars raging in this world today that started thousands of years ago. And if you think about capital punishment, is there a right answer in that? And then you'll talk to 1 million people and you'll get 1 million different opinions on it, much like hunting. History is on the side of hunting, though, I will tell you that. Historically, it falls that way. But just from a broader statement, I'd like to see our commission think about some other things besides hunting and killing bears and not killing bears a lot of times, and think about some other things that would help the people, the constituents that I represent, which is southern Nevada. And we've lost a lot economically with the loss of fishing. I was thinking about it when I went to our CAB meeting the other night, and I saw that Mike Peruga had resigned, who was the only lone guy there. He kept pushing fishing. He couldn't make any traction because nobody cares about it. There doesn't seem to be a deep passion for it. Well, I grew up on Lake Mead fishing and grew up in southern Nevada fishing these mountains. There's streams and little lakes and stuff, and it's really depleted. And our little meeting up there in Ely last year really showed me that fishing, we did our little tour, is on a decline in this state. And I'm just one voice, but I want to urge us to work on some other things as well. But there's no right answer on this one. This is a very personal, and there's no sense of insulting anybody or calling each other names, and it's just ridiculous as far as I'm concerned, because it's a personal decision, a very personal decision, and it comes from your heart and your brain, and it's tough to sway some people in that respect. So I'll vote with my conscience.
Commissioner Lane?
I do echo some of the same concerns that Commissioner McNinch has, and I will not be supporting the recommendation, but I also I certainly do understand where Commissioner Young comes from. We spent a lot of time on this issue. I came into this, my first meeting that I ever attended to this commission was about the bear hunt and the establishment of seasons. And I remember the discussion very well about not having a spring hunt or not having a spring hunt. So my problem is that I'm that part of the public that just doesn't see hunting bear, and I think part of my issue has to do with the whole hounding issue. I will say that, and I'm certainly willing, as we go through this three-year review, to take a look at the issues, because I am concerned that I don't want to be one of those people that we talked about this morning that sees an overpopulation of a species coming and doesn't want to deal with it. So I mean, I'm trying to look at it from this standpoint as well, that if we have to do something about it, if we have to continue to hunt bear, then there may be other things that we can do and other methods. But I'm waiting for this review. I don't feel comfortable right now. I think all of you know that I pretty much voted against this from the very beginning. I've made that pretty clear about where I stand. But I am concerned, based on the discussions that we had this morning, that if we have an issue, that we have to pay attention to this issue before it gets too far. And I certainly recognize that, but I just want to clarify that I will not be supporting it, the recommendations at this time.
Commissioner Moray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with some of the things that Commissioner Lane just said. Earlier in the day, the discussion was about, in managing some of these species, we have been conservative to a fault. The point was made by Mr. Gilbertson that on this issue, we have been ultra conservative. Director Wasley has told us that they have made extra efforts to provide transparency as to what's going on with the bear population. We have not harvested during the 3-year hunt. We have not harvested to the quota levels that were set. So for those reasons, it makes no sense to me to drop the season back to December 1. So I'm leaning toward the support of the department's recommendation of September 15th through December 31.
Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share many of the views of what's been said already. Commissioner Macbeth brought up that the California season has been December 31st, and it has been for a long time. And when we originally set the bear hunt up, it was based to mirror the California season. And I see no reason to change that. The department, if they felt there was a reason that they needed to change it, it would have been in their recommendation. And when we started the review, has always been from the very beginning that in 3 years we'd take another look at it. So as far as not being important, I think it was made important from day one. And I'm very glad that we're following through and we're doing the review. Commissioner Young made there's no right answer. And as far as I can see, we're being very conservative and have been from the very inception of this concept. And I have to support the department's recommendation.
Commissioner Bliss.
There's been so many good points brought up by the members of the commission, and some of the audience that I could repeat, but I'm not going to. The main thing that will make up my mind is the science and the biology that the department has, and the amount of work and time that's been put into it. They are the true professionals here, and with all the knowledge and the capability to get it and gather it and provide it to us. And myself, I have a hard time going against a recommendation to shorten this bear season and go against what the department has recommended when they have so much background and information to support it.
Anybody else? Okay, the only thing I have is I've heard a few times since we started this discussion the word appeasement. Maybe I'm hypersensitive to it now because I used it and it's been used against me a lot since I said it. I don't think any action I've taken on this commission was done in appeasement to ever think in my mind that if I made a decision, Dr. Moldy would go away, or I made a decision, Larry Johnson would go away. I know better than that. So there is no appeasement. I really know that. It's a word that comes out, and there is no such thing on this issue as appeasement because we're not going to get there on any side. So I know it's going to be brought up some more, but that's where we're at on appeasement, and I think other commissioners alluded to it in their discussion. So with that being said, does anybody have a motion to get us going on this topic? Commissioner Macbeth.
Thank you, Chairman Rob. I'd like to move to approve CR 14-08, 2014 black bear season, and specifically the season dates of September 15th through December 31st. And that's for both the resident and the non-resident hunts, 6151 and 6251.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Macbeth, second by Commissioner Young. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, vote is 7-2 with the nays being Lane and McNinch. Okay, we'll move on to 13H, Commission Regulation 14-09, 2014 Mountain Lion Season, Open Units and Harvest Limits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Bradley, Endow. Cougar population and harvest statistics are provided to illustrate the current lion population dynamics as calculated by Endow's lion population model. And this is a graph of the harvest limits since 2007 and the cougar population and the known kill. And what we started last year was to bring the harvest limit into something that resembles a sustainable harvest limit. And we continued this year to further refine that. Last year we used a 20% of adult population to be a conservative estimate, conservative limit. And this year we dropped it to 18%, primarily due to the record female take in the harvest last year. It actually was a tie for the take in 2003 of 48.9%. The good news is that the young adult ratio was one of the smaller ratios, and if you think about this, if you compare a cougar harvest to, for example, a bobcat harvest is something that you do that's you don't have a choice what kind of bobcat you harvest. It's indiscriminate, but in lions there's a discrimination, and if we're taking very few young, that means there's a very healthy segment of the adult population. So it's very different from calculating the health of a bobcat population. So the good news is we took very few young cougars last year, but the bad news was that we had a record harvest of females. So we dropped the percentage of the harvest recommendation down to 18%. So what that resulted in was a recommendation to go from statewide harvest limit of 265 to 245 with a recommendation for area for Region 1 of 83, Region 2, 113, which is separated out into 091, the interstate unit of 2, and then the rest of the Region 111. And then Region 3, the southern region of harvest limit of 49. Questions?
Any questions by the commission? Dr. Lane?
I'm assuming that this, do we have an indication of the number of cougars that are harvested not only by hunting but also by wildlife services? I mean, do we take a look at those total numbers?
Commissioner Lane, these are the total numbers here.
So that includes,
That includes everything.
that includes wildlife services as well?
Right.
The reason I'm asking that question, I'm sorry, Commissioner, but the reason I'm asking that question is because I received a study, and unfortunately I don't have that in front of me, that indicated that there was a decline in the population in California. Are you aware of that, or have you looked at the California statistics in terms of what's happening, just as a comparison and what's going on with theirs? And I guess it has to do with there was a discussion about the drought causing issues.
I don't, P. Bradley Endow, I don't have current information for the decline in the California cougar population, but it stands to reason that if big game populations are declining due to the long-term habitat trend in an area, that would automatically affect any large carnivore populations that are depending on those herds, and also depending on medium-sized prey items as well. We don't have that indication here based on our population levels for our big game. There's some fluctuations, and obviously we're in an extreme drought, but we don't see the numbers that would trigger any extreme alarm because of the kind of harvest numbers we're getting now. The huge number of adults in the population that were harvested last year, for example. It was a real big year, partly because of the way the snow conditions worked out. This year, just as an aside, we're at 90 animals right now compared to the same date last year of about 160. So the winter has a huge impact on the harvest, the actual harvest.
Okay, any other commission questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll take it out to the general public. Come on up, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Barnes, Elko County CAB, for the record. Our board went ahead and we supported the recommendations made by the department.
Come on up, Mr. Reed.
I'm John Reed, Chairman of the Washoe CAB, representing the general public, and in this case the CAB also, because Rex had to take a flight. He was our designee this time. One of our constituents brought up that he would like to have a separate hunt. He wanted to break off unit area 033, which currently we can't hunt in because it's the Sheldon. And he made a pretty good case that what he'd like to do is get a hunt with a zero quota, because in his research, we have to kind of get that thing going before we start dealing with all of the other state and federal agencies that would be involved with that. So he'd like to break that off with a zero, and then add a zero quota to it at this point.
I received that same correspondence, and with the timing of that request and not having enough time to thoroughly review that request with the department and the DAG and everybody, I'd be really reluctant to go forward on such a request at this late hour, but maybe it's something we can think about in the future, and we'll definitely look into it in the future. Any other? Come on up, Corey.
For the record, Corey Lytle, Lincoln Cab. We had some hunters there that expressed concern over some of the area-specific harvest, and they, we supported the overall recommendations, but it seems like they continually come in with questions on particular units and how those trends, occur. And we realize that there's some things on the administrative side of this that are a little more difficult. Maybe we can work toward getting more information on some of the unit-specific stuff. That's what they wanted to look at.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Wallace.
I move to approve CR 14-09, open management units and harvest limits, 2014 mountain lion season as presented by the department.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wallace, second by Commissioner Bliss. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I think there's a noteworthy situation that's occurring right now. That's the last time Larry Gilbertson will sit in front of us with a game issue in his career. And I want to personally thank you for the professional way you've gone about your business and helped the wildlife of the state of Nevada and the general public of the state of Nevada with your hard work over your career. So I really do thank you, Larry. Commissioner Bliss.
I know I talked to you yesterday, Larry, and thanked you for all the work, but I want to do it again. And you made a lot of, late nights coming to Eureka in bad weather, and when I was on the cab there, and to help us out and explain things to us, and you've done a great job, and state of Nevada and the wildlife here are lucky to have you put that many years in, and I really appreciate what you've done for them and a lot of the stuff that you've actually taught me through the process. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Commissioner Macbeth.
One of the very first Wildlife Commission meetings that I attended was, I believe, in Fernley, and I arrived late, flew in and drove how long it takes to get to Fernley from Reno, and there wasn't many people around, but Larry Gilbertson was at the bar, and so I got to go up and chat with him for a good bit of time, and ever since then I've gotten to know Larry very well, and how he operates, and his ethics, and everything, his dedication to our wildlife, and I have learned a ton from Larry, from everybody at the department, but I'll have to admit that Larry is in the game division, and where my heart is the most. He's been the one that invariably I get my information from, and so I do want to thank you, and it's been an honor working with you, and I'll be following you shortly off the commission, but hopefully I'll see you down the road.
Okay. Commissioner Young.
I'd like to echo everybody, but one other thing, as a fellow Bishop Gorman Gale, we're awful proud of you and your career, Larry, and good luck in your retirement. There's some fun out there in retirement. I just didn't do any of it yet. I hope you do.
I think now's the time to clap, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I've had a lot of people say some really kind things, and I appreciate all that, and they've talked about all the tough times we've gone through and the contentious issues and all those various things, and life's too short. We've touched on it with a few people today, to be unhappy about things, and I want you to know that what I'm going to be thinking of when I'm relaxing out there and enjoying life is all the awesome things that we've accomplished. I'm a native Nevadan, born down here in Las Vegas in Henderson, and I grew up here. My father was a bricklayer. I was, the old story, the first one to make it through college in my family. And it's been a pleasure and a dream come true. My dad and I spent all the time we could getting out of town and out in the wilds of Nevada and enjoying that. And it's hard to even let everybody know what a pleasure, what a luxury, how lucky I was to have this type of a job. I'm going to be remembering all the awesome accomplishments we've made over the years. The trapping and transplanting are big things. It's hard to explain the feeling you get when you're driving through a huge town with a load of elk in your trailer, and the responsibility you feel for having these wild animals, and they're within your hands. And you're driving through, and the traffic's getting bad, and you're thinking, wow, I better really be careful now because I'm going to make the headlines. Nevada biologist kills entire elk herd in car accident in Salt Lake City. Or coming down through Calgary with these awesome, beautiful Rocky Mountain bighorn from well, it's not even northern, it's mid-Alberta, coming down the Fraser River with California bighorn and going through Seattle, driving across icy roads through Wyoming. And we got to Salt Lake one night, and it was the mid-'80s, and the Great Salt Lake was up, and there was only one lane open. The other one was underwater. The Great Salt Lake was trying to claim it back. And, you know, the surveys I've been involved with, I calculated one time, I've been in on helicopter surveys of over 250,000 deer, thousands of elk, antelope, bighorn sheep, Rocky Mountain goats, hanging out of an open door in a helicopter, looking at cliff faces, looking for goats and sheep, and hanging out of a helicopter and able to net gun deer, antelope, and elk. And it's so exciting. It's a dream come true to be able to do those kinds of things. I kind of, you know, once in a while you think about it's a little dangerous when you're chasing antelope up a hill with a net gun in your hand, and because you're going uphill, the rocks are coming off of their feet and hitting you in the face, and you go, wow, maybe we are a little bit low. But it's pretty exciting, and it's been a real treat, and I want to thank everybody for supporting wildlife and letting us do the things we do and accomplish the things we accomplish. So thank you.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and complete the agenda.
Fish have no soul, so we go on the end of the agenda. Nobody ever named their favorite trout Sparky before. It'll be fun. Almost done. I'm holding things up here, I know. I'm holding things up. What's that? Cluttering things up with fishing regulations, yeah. Pros and cons to being at the end. Yeah.
Who's replacing Larry? Who's replacing Larry?
We don't know yet. Whoever applies, I know they sent out the announcement for his job.
So what you're saying then is that Tony hasn't had to buy a beer in weeks.
What's that?
Tony hasn't had to buy a drink in weeks. Yeah, that,
Hopefully people will try.
was ready at 10 o'clock this morning.
You enjoyed it.
Yeah. Oh. Just yet more evidence nobody gives a damn about fish. He gets to sit and suffer.
He can pay.
Yeah. We're fine. We're fine. We're fine on time.
There won't be any traffic. It's Super Bowl and everyone's coming in,
Well,
not leaving.
yeah, no, I mean, it should be fine.
Yeah. He just has a motor pool.
Well, yeah, he probably needs to take that back a little earlier then.
Yeah, because he has motor pool.
Yeah, if he has to take motor pool car back, he may want to leave 2 minutes early.
Rich said
He probably needs to allow another 15 minutes to drop off the motor pool car, so. I mean, he can leave, but he doesn't need to stick around, does he? He can head back anytime. He's got to take his motor pool back.
And he also doesn't have a place, boarding place.
Right.
I don't think so.
No, it just says it's
No,
blank.
Alan does not either. Oh my God. So he really needs to get there. Me and David made it is. I know maybe Dave maintenance and maybe we're
Yeah, that's weird. I don't understand how that happened because several of them they don't have a boarding number.
They are special. Maybe you get to go on with the handicapped folks early.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. We'll go on to 13I, Commission General Regulation 442, remove Truckee River fishing tackle restrictions. John Schoberg.
Thank you. For the record, John Schoberg, Chief of Fisheries. Chairman Robin, Commissioners. Commission General Regulation 442 removes the existing fishing tackle restriction on the Truckee River and diversion ditches and tributaries from the I-80 bridge at Crystal Peak Park upstream to the California state line through modification of NAC 503-504. As I mentioned yesterday in the workshop, this came from a recommendation of the Washoe County Wildlife Advisory Board that was adopted as part of the fishing regulations for 2014-15 at the October Commission meeting here. And this required a secondary action because of the necessary NAC change for the fishing tackle modification. As I mentioned also yesterday in the workshop, the department did a small business impact assessment on this regulation change. We surveyed master guides who were involved in chartering fishing trips on the upper Truckee River with 2 responses through a SurveyMonkey survey, both of whom indicated that they did not feel there was any significant economic impact from this regulation. In reviewing responses from the County Wildlife Advisory Boards at their meetings immediately prior to this commission meeting, there were 2 counties that indicated in support of the regulation, Washoe County and Churchill County. There were 2 counties that indicated that they were opposed to the change. That was Eureka County and Carson City. And we had no action or no response from the other county boards. There's some explanation provided in the agenda on the rationale for this change. Again, it was primarily motivated at the request of the County Wildlife Advisory Board. However, we do feel that it fits in well with the direction we've been trying to make to simplify regulations to make it easier for anglers and consistent with the remainder of the Truckee River and Washoe and Story counties in terms of the regulation. So at that point, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions of John? Okay, seeing none. Any general public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. What'd you say? Any comments? Commissioner Wallace.
I don't necessarily have a comment. Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready.
Move to approve LCB file R140-13 as presented by the department.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wallace, second by Commissioner Macbeth. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. We'll move on to 13J, Commission General Regulation 443, Wildlife Grant Program, LCB file number R14113. Patrick Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Patrick Cates, Deputy Director for Admin Services, Department of Wildlife. This regulation, as we discussed yesterday, establishes a granting process for several of the department's funding sources. These are for projects that are on-the-ground projects for wildlife restoration, habitat restoration type activities, and wildlife research. It just establishes and codifies the application of a granting process as the mechanism for transferring funds to federal, state, and local governments and nonprofit organizations that work with the department to implement those kind of projects. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Patrick? Commissioner Macbeth?
would it also apply to any grant pursuant to any kind of like a heritage project to an individual?
It would apply to individuals aren't included in the language, so it has to be a governmental organization, federal, state, or local, or a private nonprofit organization. But it does include the Heritage Program. We didn't include the language of an individual, and I'm not sure that I can think of an instance where we haven't had either a cab or a nonprofit that was behind the proposal.
There are some historical instances in the past with past commissions that did involve individuals putting in for projects, and I guess my question is that are individuals barred from putting in for a project, a heritage project, or a project in maybe one of the other upland game or the like? And should we amend this language to add individuals and basically just put in a granting process for anybody who puts in for a grant?
For the record, Patrick Cates, I don't think there was any intention to bar individuals. I think we just didn't think about it. And you are right, there have been some individuals, I think for Heritage, that were awarded money. We just didn't consider that when we were drafting the regulation. You could amend it to include individuals.
I have a lot of faith that we've gone well past, some of these kind of things happening, but we never know what's going to happen to even the makeup of this commission. And so I take great comfort in this kind of a process and all the other processes that we've put in place to deal with the issues that we went through a few years ago. And so if there's no bar for doing it, I would propose that we do, and I'm not sure how the language, maybe just adding in any individual just to make that clear, that it really applies to all grants.
Any other questions? Commissioner McBeth.
And let me just give you an example. We could be giving grants out to private contractors, animal control contractors. We have, as part of our Policy 23, we have opened the potential opportunity for maybe a for-profit corporation, not just a nonprofit, but a for-profit corporation to get a grant to do animal damage control projects. And so I just struggle with trying to understand why we wouldn't have the same process for everybody who could potentially get a grant, whether they be an individual or a for-profit corporation. And so I don't know how that maybe changes the language, but anyway, I would just throw that out. I just think of all the different possibilities we could have, and I would hate to see there not be a process for certain individuals or entities.
If I could comment on that, kind of thinking on my feet here because I didn't really think that one through. But when you talk about the predator control contractors, just one word of caution is that you use the word contractors, so we can still contract with those people. One of the difference between a granting process and a contracting process is going through a state contract has more stringent requirements for insurance, liability, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I would be maybe a little bit cautious of throwing it open a little too widely. Also, if an individual were interested in proposing a project, I don't think it would be too difficult for them to get support or sponsorship from a nonprofit organization or even an NDOW employee that they could be, co-submit a project for. I think the intention of the language of governmental entities and nonprofits was really to ensure that these are entities that are in the business of doing this kind of work. Wasn't intentionally meant to exclude individuals, but I think that was the intent of that kind of language.
Just following further up on the history of this, we had a project that was put forth by a doctor who was Dr. Maxim, who I believe had a private corporation, and so that was a research project. And so, and again, going back into my past history and the things that we went through and the kind of projects that got pushed through by this commission, I really like this regulation. I like this process. I think it's transparent. I think it's exactly where we need to be. And I just don't want to see anybody slipping through the cracks. I think everybody should be subjected to it. Have to go through that if it's and I understand if it's a contract, they're going to have those, if we do a contract, it's going to be equally, if not more, stringent. But if it is cast in terms of a grant, it almost seems like that the grant process would only apply to these entities, and then everybody else would have to go through a contracting process. And I'm not sure, is that what we intend? Is that the right way to do it? I'm just throwing this out. I just kind of noticed this stuff when you read the language again. I started thinking.
Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just looking at it from a different perspective, is that if an individual comes forth with a project like that, it would make it a little more realistic if they have to go through a nonprofit or another entity. That way you kind of got another layer of in between just an individual throwing forth a project. I mean, you've kind of got you're limiting in a way, but at the same time, you're also, if it's a good project and they can get someone else to sign on to work with them, it might make it better.
If that's the case, then I think that at some place in our in the regulation or in granting projects, we need to say that it's limited to these entities. And I guess I'd ask that question: is that the case? That's why I asked you in my very first question was: is an individual barred from getting a grant? In the first instance, how they, from a qualification standpoint.
I don't have a good answer. I think it's the pleasure of the commission. It was not an intention to exclude those individuals. These were just the entities we normally work with. And I really didn't think about those. There's only a handful of them of examples where something went to a private individual or just a company. We could do it either way. I would say certainly that when we develop the process for awarding grants, that one of the things that we would probably want to put in our evaluation criteria is that if they have support, sponsorship from NDOW or nonprofit organization involved in conservation, that would probably tend to make them score better. It's the pleasure of the commission, however you'd like to do it. We could add or private individuals or private nonprofit organizations or individuals, maybe. I'm not quite sure.
Commissioner Morai?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Commissioner Macbeth on it because I think if my memory serves me right, though, we had a habitat project that an individual brought forth and was granted the funds, a sage grouse habitat project that was a good project. And those people may be eliminated if we didn't add that kind of language in here.
What if we changed on subparagraph 3, an application for a grant may be submitted to the department by a federal, state, or local government entity or a private organization or individual, perhaps?
Okay, any other questions while everybody's making notes? No. This is a action item. Any general public comments on this? Mr. Dixon.
For the record, Paul Dixon speaking on behalf of himself, even though he's the chairman of Clark County. Several years ago, I was one of the individuals that was concerned that we were funding individuals rather than organizations or things. And I'm going to support Commissioner Wallace's comments on this. I don't believe that we should be lowering this to the individual level. I think we need to have organizations. If an individual has a great idea, then he ought to be tied to an organization that's nonprofit or something to make things go on, because I saw, and why I filed a lawsuit was I saw abuses of the system. And there were changes made to how we do Heritage Fund distributions based on that, and I would hate to see us go back to a place where we allow individuals, if they have good ideas, Pete or Mike, I believe that there's plenty of people out there that they can join with the nonprofits to do things, but I think we need that layer of security. I have a problem with, we start getting it down to individuals, and you can be at the discretion of a commission that we had before to give individuals things that I don't think they need to have. Thank you.
Commissioner Macbeth.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody's clear of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I don't think that this regulation deals with the issue of who is eligible to get a grant. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a bar for an individual or for-profit corporation to apply for a grant? Would there be a discriminatory argument that they could make, or in other words, what are the eligibility requirements? Because if we can make just these types of entities only eligible, then I'm fine with that. And then it's consistent with this regulation. What my issue and my problem is that if we have additional types of entities and individuals that are eligible for grants, that we cannot deny them the opportunity to get a grant. It seems like they slip through the cracks from this on this regulation.
For the record, Patrick Cates. Yeah, paragraph 3 definitely sets that limitation. By omitting them, they would be disqualified if they submitted a project under this language. As I said, it wasn't a really conscious effort to do that, but I'm kind of on the fence, but I see a lot of value of making people partner with known conservation groups and governmental entities that are involved in conservation. But we could change the language. I don't think there's that much harm in it.
Commissioner Macbeth.
So you're saying this is the eligibility requirement for these grants?
Yes.
In this instance?
Yes, because that subparagraph 3 defines who can submit for a grant, and it only lists those entities. So it would exclude private individuals or a for-profit company or anyone else that wasn't either governmental or a private nonprofit.
Okay, then I would ask our DAG, does our DAG see any problem with excluding individuals and for-profit corporations from getting these public funds?
I'm not aware of any at this point as I sit here, but that's not a question that I have looked at in any depth. So if that's something you need an answer to move forward on this, then I'm going to need some time.
That would be fair.
Commissioner Drew.
Just to address this a little bit, sometimes when I'm not in meetings, I have a for-profit corporation job, and we apply for a fair amount of grants, and there are a fair amount of grants that have this stipulation. And typically, if we're involved, we're preparing it for a client, whether it's local government or an NGO group or whatever else. So, I mean, there's plenty of ways for private individuals and corporations to partner and be able to implement some of these projects. I think, to me, it's not anything that rang a bell for me, having applied for several grants on behalf of other clients and organizations. So maybe I have a more level of comfort and familiarity with this through some other processes, but I don't see necessarily a problem as it's written.
I have a question for you, Patrick. Is anything in this regulation today time sensitive for you? It seems like I've seen the look on your face, Tony's face, David Newton's face going, boy, I wish I had a couple more answers to know where we're at. If we held this off today so we could all feel better about this, because it seems like we have more questions, and I'd hate to pull the trigger one way or another and miss something. If there's nothing time sensitive, would we be better off discussing this offline and bringing it back at a future date to make sure we don't miss?
For the record, Patrick Cates, I don't think there's really anything time sensitive for this. We already have an established sub-granting process, a granting process for heritage, and we are already following granting processes for most of these funds. We already have authority in the state administrative manual to do that. This was just clarification on what types of programs would qualify. And if I could just add, I would kind of echo Jeremy's comments. From my experience from a state perspective, having worked in multiple programs, I'm not aware of any federal or state law that would say it would be discriminatory to not include individuals. I've seen a lot of granting programs where they had these kind of requirements that you had to be some sort of nonprofit foundation or something of that nature, and often their private corporations are barred from participating, or at least, being the applicant, I should say. But if you want more time to consider it, there's nothing pressing about
It would be up to the commission whether we took more time, but I just wanted to throw that out there so everybody knew what we were up against. What's the flavor of the commission? Any public comment on this? We've got somebody that does granting and has received grants for her whole career, so maybe she might be able to get us out of the doghouse on this. You're going to have to fill out a card in the end.
Ricky Robb, for the record, Department of Health and Human Services, and as a grant manager and a contract manager, whatever those stipulations are actually written in your code are followed. And it is not typical to grant to an individual, specifically an individual, as well as for-profit. So normally they are conjoined with a nonprofit agency. And of course you have to have the same mission and vision, but it's not typically for-profit or an individual. And I am a grant manager for Department of Health and Human Services Director's Office, as well as a contract manager.
And received grants as a nonprofit
And
for 10 years.
I've been a nonprofit executive director for 10 years. So I can say, you can, one, if your RFA or RFP requires that, that's what you need to follow. And I will say, as a contract manager, we don't typically grant to individuals, and they can become an actual contractor within the state and be approved that way.
I don't want to hold this up. I'm satisfied, and and if somebody's going to challenge this, they're going to challenge it. But if this seems to be the way things are done, I'm not that familiar with this granting process. I just have bad memories that are driving my concerns here, and so we can skin that cat by excluding them in the front end, or subjecting them to this regulation, in the granting process that this regulation does. And so either way, I just want, my goal here is to make sure that this process is in place and sound, and all applicants are subjected to it. That's really what I'm getting at. I don't want anybody slipping through the cracks. So I'm perfectly good to go back to the language as written, and let's vote.
Chairman Robb, if I can comment on that, it's not considered an exclusion. It's considered who is an appropriate applicant. So it's not necessarily considered an exclusion. So, thank you.
That's probably the first and last time that'll ever happen. Okay. Yes. Oh, your mic's not on there, so you won't get on the record. I'm looking for there you got a red light.
I don't think this precludes, say in a heritage process or something like that, contracting with private individuals or for-profits. This is a granting process, so there's other processes available to allocate funds. So it's not like we're restricting everybody to going through a grant process. There's other alternatives. Correct? Yeah.
Okay. Everybody clear on where we're at now? All righty. Do you have a motion, Mr. Macbeth, after all that? We have a
Second.
motion by Commissioner Macbeth, second by Commissioner McNinch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. We're going to move on to agenda item number 14, future commission meetings and committee assignments. Secretary Wazley.
Our next commission meeting is March 21st and 22nd in Reno. I currently have five items that I've picked up the last couple days. Probably the single biggest item is the cab workshop. And as you might recall, yesterday I solicited input for that. If any commissioners or any cabs have any ideas, they can email them to the director's office, and we'll make sure they get included on that agenda. Shed antler regulation. Is it the commission's desire to workshop that again?
Yes, please.
Okay, that'll be on there for as a workshop. And then the Nevada Guides and Outfitters. I recall that the commission also expressed a desire to workshop that again due to the changes. And then also the black powder draft regulation based on general discussion, so that will also be a workshop, I assume.
Yeah, workshop and for action on all three of those.
Okay. And then the last
I'm sorry,
item
Tony. Workshop, on these regulations that we have time, we did make a commitment that we would workshop at one time, let the county advisory boards have another crack at it, and then do a final at following commission meeting, so I'm sorry about doing that to you.
Okay. So just be workshop on those three?
Yes.
And then the final item that I have is we have a appeal on a license revocation. It'll also be on the agenda.
Okay.
Another item that I'd written down that we can probably handle independent of the commission meeting is Clark County Advisory Board expressed an interest in wildlife harassment laws, and we can provide them that information directly, or if it's a desire of the commission, we could certainly provide some informational item on that.
Yeah, if we could have an informational item on that, I think it'd be good for everybody here. Commissioner Lane?
When are we going to start looking at legislative issues for the 2015? I know it seems like it's really early, but I'm just asking the question because we're going to run out of time. I mean, we don't have that many commission meetings between now and the start of the legislature.
I'm trying to think who's on the legislative committee. Maybe we need to have them have a meeting and try to kick some stuff around with the department and start getting those as informational reports. And then if there's something that we need to make as an action item, we can bring it forward to a commission meeting then. So I think that might be our best avenue, is to schedule a legislative committee meeting and see what the department has that they know of and what ideas maybe individuals, commissioners, or anybody might have to take forward as potential legislation, and start working it through the committee and then through informational items, and then if we need to take some action, we can make some action reports at that time. Commissioner Macbeth?
We were having some discussions, some of us offline, about the use of unmanned drones in scouting and those kind of activities. And I understand that this new technology is here and being used, and I'd kind of like to get the whole commission to maybe look at that issue.
And I wish Rob was here, but I don't know if our current flying ordinance includes drones, because that's flying for wildlife related.
His contention is that it does.
Okay. That would be good. Commissioner McNinch?
And along those same lines, I can tell you that there have been states that have built it into their regulations anyway, just to make it absolutely clear. And then I had one item as well. There was a comment about filing a possible amicus brief with regards to the horse lawsuit that was recently filed. And, I know that that's been an issue for us for a long time and probably worth some discussion.
Commissioner Macbeth?
And along those lines, actually, the discussion that was had with the former director was that, the former DAG, one of the former DAGs, was that that if that lawsuit was ever filed, that we would consider actually joining the lawsuit as opposed to just filing. There's a difference between filing an amicus brief and actually joining. And I thought I recalled that the governor had actually indicated that he didn't want the department to be the lead on that, but that he had it was okay. It would be okay if the department joined, and we have joined. We have clearly joined in many instances on these wild horse gather lawsuits that have been filed, and so I would actually like to see the department consider actually joining in that litigation.
Okay, any other commission comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Back to the drone question just for a second. I would highly recommend that you amend your flying statute or regulation to include drones specifically.
Okay.
Instead of hoping to cover it or thinking you have it covered. It's much better on something like that, especially if you have significant heartburn, to be proactive rather than reactive on that.
So,
Especially as I understand now, you can pick up a drone for less than $500 and the prices are going down. I think you're going to see them become much more prevalent.
all right. Any other commission items? Seeing none, this is an action item. Is there any general public comment on this item? Seeing none, the only other thing on here is, Commissioner McNitch.
Sorry, one more, you didn't say you were moving on yet.
Nope.
I do plan to not be here at the next meeting, so if there's something that you feel like I need to be here for, I don't see it right now in the cards, but I do plan to not be here at the next meeting, so.
That's my understanding and has been every year since March Madness came along. The only other thing I have is committee assignments. With Chad Bliss's work on the Silver State Tag and the money he's put into the state through the Silver State Tag, I think it would only be appropriate that he sit on the Heritage Committee overseeing the expenditure of those funds. So if memory serves me correct, he's not on there, but now he is. So, anything else before I move on? Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 15, public comment. Do you have any cards, Commissioner Drew, specifically for public comment?
I have a stack, but I would just say if you have public comment, please come up and I'll note it on your card.
Dr. Moldy, followed by Fred Volz.
Mr. Chairman, Don Moldy-Reno, a couple of quick things. Earlier today, when you were talking about the bighorn ewe hunt and questions about cost of trap and transplantation and so on, the number $600 to $800 was kicked around as a cost per animal, I guess. I couldn't help thinking at that time, when it sounded like money was short, that over the last 10 years in Project 18, on the predator management projects, you spent $807,000 over 10 years to kill 1,251 animals, mostly coyotes. And if you divide the little number into the big number, you spend about $650 to kill each individual animal. About the same amount that you were claiming you were short to trap and transplant ewes. Just wanted to remind you of that. Your last item about grants reminded me to speak briefly about this in case it may become pertinent down the road. Recently, I've been looking at the mountain lion data spreadsheets that Mr. Haskins kindly forwarded to me since 2008. And while I was looking for evidence of trap injury to lion carcasses being examined, I did find something that quite astonished me. Starting in 2008 with one animal, but increasing in the rest of the years until last year, Wildlife Services turned in 26 mountain lion carcasses that were so mummified, so desiccated, so decayed, as to essentially be useless from the point of view of checking the animals in. And the last comment that I took off the sheet from this last year, the biologist stated, partially mummified, skull bleached. Biologist estimates greater than 6 months in the snare. Some of these animals were caught in coyote traps and snares accidentally. They were described as incidental kills by Wildlife Services. But the bodies were badly decomposed, not salvageable, badly decomposed, not salvageable. Only the head was brought in. And the reason I mention this is because, as we all know, you've essentially been fired by Wildlife Services. And it looks like maybe the timing is right, because if you look at this mountain lion stuff, you get the idea that this is a rogue agency that has in no way, shape, or form tried to follow the rules or do anything that's reasonable to protect the public's interest. And if you get into the private contractor business, those guys better follow the rules. And I'm sorry that your biologists, I understand the department tried to handle this internally, and I think they probably did a good job of it, but I wish it had been brought to your attention as well for a public discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Volz, followed by Stephanie Meyer.
For the record, Fred Volz. Reflecting on the series of snafus we heard about yesterday regarding the video conferencing, seems like we're not looking at some options that should be explored for viability. One of them would be the Public Utilities Commission. They have full video conferencing, and they do a full recording of a record that they keep of all testimony and all of their quasi-judicial actions. It's very disappointing to hear that state agencies who are supposed to be working together are operating in silos and can't cooperate with each other. So I'd like to also suggest that private enterprise be explored. There are casino groups that operate both in the north and south part of the state. There's NV Energy, and there are any number of other large concerns that are likely to have video conferencing capabilities and probably would be happy to generate some revenue from those facilities, which they're not using 24/7. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Myers, Lee Canyon. I just want to second what Mr. Volz said, simply because I want to thank Mr. Volz and Dr. Moldy and Ms. Swain. They came down on their own dime, but I can't afford a plane ticket to go up to Reno or to the next trapping committee meeting. And so I feel like I don't have a voice because there is no video conferencing. And my not having a voice may be just fine with you guys, but it's just unfair. So please get video conferencing as soon as you can. Thank you. It's not fair for March.
And I'm going to make a comment on who has a voice. I think that's why we have a traveling roadshow that we do, is to offer that voice to the public around the state. There's a reason we have multiple meetings a year in Las Vegas, multiple meetings a year in Reno, and then a couple of meetings a year in rural counties. And that's how we get the voice of the people, and that's how we ensure that there's public participation. So I understand what you're saying about video conferencing, but I believe this commission's gone to every length it can to get as much participation from the public across the state as we possibly can. Thank you. Who else? Public comment. No more public comment. Dr. Dixon.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Chairman of Clark County CAB. I'd just like to, at the end of the day, thank Maureen Hollinger for the stuff that she sent out on all of the regulatory and legislative stuff to us, the kind of the summary things. It was a huge help at my CAB getting me prepared to get in front of the group of people and quickly summarize where the changes were and to move quickly through my agenda. So just a personal thank to Maureen for the hard work that she does for all of us, and Tony and your staff. So thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, that concludes agenda item 15, and we're adjourned.